There is a coordinated push in this country right now to break the Australian gas industry. Not reform it, not improve it, but break it. It comes from the Greens. It comes from the Australian Institute. It comes from activist creators like Punters Politics.
Cheers, Punts.
And it comes dressed up as fairness. A 25% tax on gas exports that claim will fund free university, dental, housing, you name it. It is a lie. And the new East Coast gas reservation policy that the Albanese government has just announced is the same lie wearing a different costume. Both ideas attack the same thing, the investment that makes Australian gas possible in the first place. Today we're going to walk through the numbers, the misinformation, and what a sensible centre-right energy policy actually looks like for this country. I'm Mel Pikos, and today we're talking tactics. The claim that started it all. You have probably seen the talking point everywhere. Australia collects more tax from beer than it does from gas.
We're paying more tax on our beer than these bludgers are on our own gas. Do drink a lot of beer.
It's a great line. It's also deeply misleading. Here's where the number comes from. The Petroleum Resource Rent Tax, the PRRT, has historically collected somewhere between $900 million and $2 billion a year. Beer excise pulls in around $2.5 billion. So yes, in some years, beer excise alone is larger than PRRT alone. But the PRRT is one tax on one slice of the industry, offshore petroleum profits. That's it. When activists quote that figure, they conveniently leave out everything else the gas industry pays. Let's add it up properly. According to the Australian energy producers, the industry's peak body, the oil and gas sector paid roughly $17 billion in company tax, PRRT, and state royalties in the 2022 to 23 financial year. In a single year. That includes the company tax rate of 30%, the full corporate rate, PRRT on offshore profits, state royalties on onshore production, payroll tax, GST on domestic sales, and excise on petroleum products. Beer excise is $2.5 billion. The gas industry contributes nearly 7 times that figure. And that's before you count the $69 billion in export revenue that flows into our trade balance and supports the Australian dollar. So when you hear beer is taxed more than gas, what's really being said is if we ignore 6 of the 7 taxes gas pays less than beer. That isn't analysis, that's advocacy dressed up as a statistic. Who's behind this? The 25% export tax proposal didn't come out of nowhere. It was modelled and promoted by the Australian Institute, a left-wing think tank, and championed politically by the Greens and independent Senator David Pocock. The Australian Institute has spent years arguing Australia should mirror Norway's 78% effective tax rate on petroleum. They produced the modelling, the Greens turn it into a press release, activist creators amplify it on TikTok and YouTube, and then it gets repeated as common sense. It is not common sense. It's a deliberate strategy to make gas projects financially unviable. And they've said so. The Greens' stated policy is no new gas projects, full stop. A 25% revenue tax isn't a fairness measure for them. It's a kill switch. You don't have to take my word for it. Read their submissions. They want the industry gone. And while we're talking conflicts of interest, let's talk about Senator Pocock for a moment. According to the Australian Electoral Commission's own disclosure records, the single largest donor to David Pocock's 2022 Senate campaign was Climate 200, the political funding vehicle convened by Simon Holmes à Court. Climate 200 contributed roughly $856,000 to his campaign. That's not a small donation. That's the foundation his Senate seat was built on. And Climate 200's stated purpose is to back candidates who oppose new fossil fuel projects. Its major backers include wealthy investors with direct financial stakes in the renewable energy sector. So when an independent senator who was put in parliament by a fund whose biggest donors are heavily invested in renewables stands up and demands a 25% tax that would cripple gas, you're entitled to ask whether that is policy analysis or whether that constitutes getting what they paid for. And I'd ask the same question of a senator funded by Woodside. The principle has to cut both ways. Why a 25% revenue tax kills every project. This is the part that most commentators skip. There is an enormous difference between a tax on profit and a tax on revenue. And the proposed 25% export tax is the second kind, revenue. Let me walk you through a simplified gas project to show you what that actually means. A typical Australian LNG project, Gorgon, Wheatstone, Ichthys, Prelude, costs between $30 and $60 billion to build, just to build. And think about all the tax you have got to pay just to build in this country. Before a single molecule of gas is shipped, once it's running, operating costs typically eat 60 to 70 cents of every dollar of revenue. That includes drilling, processing, liquefaction, shipping, staff, maintenance, and depreciation on the original mega investment. So out of every $100 of export revenue, the project might keep $30 to $40 as gross margin. Then it pays the 30% company tax on profit, then PRRT on top. The actual net margin sitting at the bottom of the page is in the good years around 10 to 15 cents in the dollar. Some marginal projects are in the low single digit margins. Now stack a 25% revenue tax on top of this. This is not a 25% bite out of the profit. This is a 25% bite out of the top of the income statement before any costs are paid. On a project running at a 15% net margin, a 25% revenue tax doesn't reduce the profit, it eliminates it completely and puts the project in the red. The project goes from marginally profitable to catastrophically loss-making overnight. And this isn't theoretical. Wood Mackenzie, the global energy consultancy, has consistently warned that revenue-based taxes on capital-intensive resource projects don't redistribute the profit, they destroy it, because there's nothing for the tax to share in the first place. The Australian Institute knows this. The Greens know this. That is the point. A 25% export tax doesn't fund free university. It freezes every new project in the country, kills the existing ones inside a decade, and ends the industry that pays $17 billion a year in tax. 25% of nothing is nothing. Zero zilch. The Norway Myth. Norway taxes at 78%. Why can't we? Because Norway is not Australia. The Norwegian system works because the Norwegian state owns the industry. Equinor, formerly Statoil, is majority government owned. Norway took strategic ownership stakes in every major field. They share the upfront capital risk. They share the geological risk. They share the price risk. When you co-own the project, taxing it at 78% is just moving money between your own pockets. Australia took the opposite path and it has worked. We let private capital take the exploration risk, the drilling risk, the construction risk, the multi-decade payback risk. In exchange, they keep more of the upside. That's how Australia became the world's largest LNG exporter without putting a single dollar of taxpayers' money on the line for the capital. You cannot copy Norway's tax rate without copying Norway's ownership model. And nationalising the Australian gas industry would cost hundreds of billions of dollars in compensation, assuming it's even constitutionally possible. The Australian Institute never mentions this. They quote the 78% figure and they stop talking. Qatar is the same story. Qatar Energy is 100% state-owned. The state isn't taxing the industry, it is the industry. The Reservation Trap. Now to the new policy, because this is where I part company with the Prime Minister. The Albanese government has announced a national gas reservation scheme for the East Coast. From mid-2027, the three major Queensland LNG projects will be forced to keep 20% of their production for the Australian domestic market. I understand the politics. Domestic gas prices have hurt households and manufacturers. Western Australia has a reservation policy and lower prices. The intuition is obvious. Keep more gas at home and prices fall. But the policy is bad economics, and here's why. One, it's retrospective. These LNG projects were sanctioned and built under one set of rules. Investors put in tens of billions of dollars based on long-term export contracts. Changing the rules on existing projects is what economists call sovereign risk. It tells every future investor that an Australian contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. 2, it doesn't add a single molecule of supply. The East Coast gas shortage isn't because we export too much. It's because Victoria and New South Wales have spent 20 years blocking onshore gas development. Victoria had an onshore conventional gas moratorium from 2017 to 2021. New South Wales still has effective moratoriums across most of the state. The Northern Territory's Beetaloo Basin sits on enough gas to power Australia for a century, but it's held back by green tape and endless review processes. Reservation is rearranging deck chairs. The actual problem is supply, and the activists who pushed for the 25% tax are the same activists who got the moratoriums passed in the first place. 3, it kills the next LNG investment cycle. Why would any company commit $40 billion to a new Australian gas project knowing the government can retrospectively redirect 20% of the output? They won't. They'll build it in the United States or Qatar instead. And in 15 years, when current projects deplete, we'll be importing LNG into an LNG exporting country. The alternative: grow the pie. There is a better answer than taxing the industry to death or forcing it to subsidize the domestic market. You grow the industry, grow the pie, lift the moratoriums. Victoria, New South Wales, and the Northern Territory have collectively quarantined trillions of cubic feet of gas. End the moratoriums. Approve Beetaloo, approve Narrabri, approve Otway expansion. More supply means lower prices without breaking a single contract. Cut the green tape. A new gas project in Australia now requires upwards of 7 years and hundreds of millions of dollars in environmental approvals before drilling can begin. This isn't environmental protection, that's regulatory sabotage. Streamlining the EPBC Act, set hard statutory timeframes, stop letting activists weaponize the courts to delay every project indefinitely. Reform the PRRT properly. I'll grant the activists half a point. The PRRT does need reform. The original 1987 design allowed deductions to compound at uplift rates that, in hindsight, were too generous. The 2023 Treasury reforms capping deductions at 90% of assessable receipts were a sensible adjustment. PRRT receipts have already roughly doubled as a result. That's how you reform a profits tax. You calibrate it. You don't replace it with a revenue tax that nukes the industry. Encourage exploration. Don't punish it. Every dollar spent on exploration today is gas revenue and tax receipts in the 2030s. Norway figured this out. They invest in their own industry. We should too. The activist position is degrowth dressed up as fairness. The conservative position is more investment, more production, more royalties, more company tax, more PRRT, more jobs, lower prices. Growing the pie. The bottom line. The 25% gas export tax is not a fairness policy. It is an industry-killing policy designed by people who openly want the industry killed. The beer excise versus gas tax line is a misleading talking point that ignores 6 of the 7 taxes gas pays. Australia already collects around $17 billion a year from the industry. Reservation policy adds sovereign risk without adding supply. And the real problem, East Coast gas shortages, was caused by the same activists now offering to solve it. If we want lower prices, more revenue, and a bigger sovereign wealth contribution from gas, the answer isn't to strangle the industry, it's to back it. And one last thing before I sign off, because I know what some of you are going to say in the comments. I am not a spokesperson for the gas industry. I have never been paid by a gas company, a mining company, a lobby group, or even anyone else with a stake in this debate. I don't own gas stocks. I have zero financial interest in whether the PRRT goes up, down, or sideways. I'm not here to carry water for Woodside or Santos. I'm here because populist economic policy that sounds good on TikTok is making this country poorer, and somebody has to push back on it with actual numbers. That's the whole point of this channel. Call out stupid ideas, walk through the maths, trust the audience to handle the detail. That's it. So if this video helped you cut through the noise, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel get this kind of analysis in front of more Australians. Drop a comment with what you think. Should Australia copy Norway without copying its ownership model? Is the reservation policy just a tax by another name? I read every single comment, and if you're not already subscribed, we've got more on Australian tax, energy, and economic policy coming. And if you don't want to miss out, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. I'm Pikos, and we've been talking tactics.